Hello, and welcome to Recapping with Delora
and Ashley.
Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Recapping Podcast.
Also, rate, review, and subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. We're on all the things.
We want to hear your thoughts on the movies and shows we review.
Leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or our YouTube channel, and we will read them during the show.
Or reach out to us on social media. We love talking all things entertainment and pop culture with you.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you. Hey, Ashley.
Hey, girl. Hey. Oh, my goodness. Last show of 2023.
Let's go. All right. I'm going to go ahead and say trigger warning because the subject of this film is cringy, frankly. It's loosely based off of a true story that happened back in the 90s, where there was an adult teacher and a male student. And yeah, so just trigger warning. All right, we are recapping May, December movie that just came out. It is a drama, 1 hour and 53 minutes long, rated R. It was released in theaters November 17th of this year and became available on streaming December 1st on Netflix. Here's a quick summary. 20 years after their notorious tabloid romance gripped the nation, Grace Atherton Yu and her husband Joe, 23 years her junior, braced themselves for their twins to graduate from high school when Hollywood actress Elizabeth Berry comes to spend time with the family to better understand Gracie, who will be playing in a film. Family dynamics unravel under the pressure of the outside gaze. Joe, never having processed what happened in his youth, starts to confront the reality of life as an empty nester at 36. And as Elizabeth and Gracie study each other, the similarities and differences between the two women begin to ebb and flow. Set in picturesque and comfortable Camden, Maine, May December is an exploration of truth, storytelling, and difficulties of fully understanding another person. Cast: Natalie Portman as Elizabeth, Julianne Moore, my favorite redhead in Hollywood, as Gracie.
I'm glad you distinguished in Hollywood, because I was going to say, I thought I was your favorite redhead. What are you
first of all,
saying?
I adore redheads. It breaks my heart whenever they bleach their hair blonde. Always. And one of my favorite redheads, who's actually isn't a natural redhead, is Emma Stone.
I know. So funny when you find out she's a natural blonde. It's mind-blowing.
But her skin tone screams red, you know?
Yeah. Freckles.
Charles Milton as Joe-Yo, Corey Michael Smith as Georgie, and D.W. Moffat as Tom Alderton. Director, Todd Hines. And we have a long list of producers. I'm going to go ahead and highlight the screenwriters. We have Sammy Birch and Alex Machenka. Rotten Tomatoes, 92% critics. Audience score, 71%. Google users, 74%. Ashley, what's your grade for May, December?
I can't give this a grade. It's an NA for me. This subject matter is such
Ooh.
to where I cannot give this a grade. Do I think the performances were amazing? I do. Especially for me, Natalie Portman, because I think I talked about this before. When an actor plays an actor, it's like a master class to watch the processes that they go through to shift in and out of acting as an actor, trying to act. You know what I mean? Like, it's just such a mind fuck to me. And so I really, especially the scenes where Natalie Portman's character is trying to figure out the psychology of Julianne Moore's character and put that into some type of visual of what she would do in her project. Those scenes were crazy to watch. The subject matter, though, is so cringeworthy that I felt so deeply for Joe's character. And I sent you a video that somebody put into, I think it was a People article of the Mary Kay Letourneau
Yes.
interview with her significant other at a time when they were still together, and snippets from that being pulled
2018.
for this movie. And it was just disgusting to sit through. Like, I just couldn't. I was like, I don't, if I was the reporter, and I just could not have even done it. Like, I
He
could not
did
sit there with a
his
straight
thing
face.
though. He really tried
He
to go
tried.
in.
He
Yeah.
tried, but I think it would come down to respect. And for me, I cannot respect this relationship, this union, this thought process rather that she is trying to go down.
Yeah.
So shut it down. So that was one of the things for me about, about the movie too, is like trying to have respect for Julianne Moore's character and all that they have going on, was tough. So NA, but superior performances from a great cast.
I went ahead and I graded it a B minus. I thought the performances were well done. This movie was a bit eerie too. You know, it got nominated for a Golden Globe under comedy and musical. There's nothing funny or musical about this
Some
film.
people seem to think it's hilarious. That was a whole thing I saw when I was doing research last night, was people seem to think this is campy and funny.
It was very
And
campy, and the
well,
music was a lot. I was like, it
so
sounded like a horror film
that
more
was
than
one of the things people were like,
anything.
what about these music cues? And just some people there were multiple reactions. Some people were like, this is very campy. Some people were like, this is very funny. To your point, I didn't find any real moments of humor in it after two watches. So I don't know what anybody else finds funny about it, but it did sometimes get over the top with behavior, I guess I'll say, as no spoiler alert
The
yet.
way that Gracie and Elizabeth pouted their mouths, I was just like, I wanted to punch them in the face. It was too much.
Well, also
It
that
was too
accent,
much.
that accent, that accent.
That's
Is
so
it an
true.
accent? Is it a lisp? What's
Oh my gosh, that's so true. Let's go ahead and get into the spoiler alert, okay? As the summary suggests, this movie is about a TV actress hoping to transition into film, and her first project is to play Gracie. I don't even want to say formally disgraced because they were pariah in their small community.
they would get
Gracie,
boxes of shit sent to their house.
girl, Shadow's Gracie, played by the great Julianne Moore, loosely based off of Mary Kay from the 90s. And then her husband, Joe, loosely based off of Billy. This movie is a series of interactions with Elizabeth being at the center. Her character is the one stirring up the pot, right? Because at this moment in time, this is years from the initial incident. We have Joe, who is 36 years old, who is about to be a freaking empty nester with his children, leaving the house for high school graduation. Elizabeth interacts with everyone from Gracie's ex husband, her lawyer, her son, Georgie, from a previous relationship, as well as Gracie and Joe. Let's first start with her interaction with Tom. The first time we see him and he tells his side of the story, he seems entirely too calm for me, Ashley. And I knew something was up because at the end of her conversation with him, he refers to Joe as her and the boy. That felt very intentional to me. Do you think there was more to the story than he was letting on?
I don't know if I get the sense that there's more to the story, more so that he is someone who tries to contain his emotions, possibly to his own detriment. That's why I think when you have the scene thereafter and Natalie Portman comments that she could see how being married to him would be isolating. I think it may
Yes.
be because he is the type of person who represses his feelings and tries to look on the bright side, which obviously in this situation, I want to be a Tom. Because if my wife, who I've had multiple children with and been married to for a substantial period of time, and we're in our mid 30s, decided to have an affair with a 12 or 13-year-old, you need to be a Tom because you may not survive it. You know what I mean? Like, I think that I gave so much grace to Tom's character because I think it took a different level of strength than a lot of us may know whether or not we have until we're put in that situation. And sometimes you got to be a little delusional or a little, I'm going to have to look on the sunny side of life to move through. Because otherwise, he may have tried to kill her. He may have tried to kill him. He may have tried to kill himself. He
Ooh,
may have done a lot of things in reaction to that. Think about not just the fallout for him publicly, but the fallout internally within his own family, within his own
yes,
children, the trauma that him and his children endured as a result of his wife's actions. That's a lot to recover from.
absolutely. Well said. I thought that was an interesting factor as well. How Elizabeth said she felt she could see how it could be isolating, but I agree with what you said. Oh, and it was probably necessary for him to survive. Let's talk about Elizabeth's visit with the lawyer. The lawyer was really interesting to me because he had no shame in terms of really stating how he felt about the whole situation. He reiterated to Elizabeth that Gracie kept saying, "We're in love." And she was so delusional, she didn't even expect to go to jail. And Elizabeth asked him, like, "Hey, did it ever sink in?" And he was like, "Yeah, no. Have you met her?" That was essentially that interaction. When it comes to the lawyer, for me, his character solidifies that Gracie built the world she lives in, and she has no desire to ever leave it. Like, it's her little bubble and she's going to stay in it. I mean, one of the things that Elizabeth noticed is that Gracie has this bakery business. And he was like, "Have you noticed? It's the same repeat customers,
Including his wife.
including his wife. But they are literally walking around like everything is A-OK."
This relationship between her lawyer and her seemed to ring true again from what I saw of the real life situation with
Yes.
Mary Kay Letourneau and her lawyer in terms of that, kind of going to bat for her and her mindset, which is very scary to me. I was like, I know that
Very,
you're a lawyer and you're supposed to uphold the law in terms of doing what you need to do for your client during their trial and all this and that, but to still be friends with her and to validate her mindset and her experiences is a choice. And so at this point, I don't know what to say to you or your wife, sir. That's very dangerous to me, the way that not only Gracie behaved, but the way that you would have people, including neighbors or anybody else, backing up your experience. I'm not saying, now this is where I say too was murky for me with respect, because child sexual offenses are top tier criminal behavior to me. Like, I know that
yep,
not everybody has a hierarchy for crime, but that's top tier for me. Like, you mess with a child, there's no
yes,
real rehabilitation or going back from that for me. And so I'm not saying that I would, spit at her in public, but I'm saying I'm not going to be friends with her. I'm not going to validate this family
yes.
that you supposedly created with a child that you abused, no matter how you want to make it look today. So the fact that there's other grown adults in this film in her corner is disturbing.
Very. We meet Georgie, who was quite entertaining. He talks about how he found out about the quote unquote affair and how it ruined his life essentially. I think it's interesting because he's the same age as Joe. I'm not going to lie. First impressions of Georgie, it's like I see childhood trauma a mile away.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the fact that everybody kept calling him sensitive, I'm like, is he sensitive or is he just gay? and y'all want to call him sensitive because he was gay and figuring out his sexuality. And then you throw on top, not only am I figuring out my sexuality, but then my mom starts fucking a kid
My
in my
friend.
class.
Exactly.
Like that seemed like a small, tight knit community. So I'm sure there was some level
Very.
of discrimination against him and feelings about him. And to his point, the kid that he has some type of sexual interaction with never spoke to him again, all of that. I'm figuring all this other stuff out, let
Yep.
alone my mom doing this unimaginable act and getting busted in the stock room of a pet store
Girl.
with this child. Who caught them? That's what I wanted them to answer in that movie. Who caught them? Was it the guy we meet or his mama?
Ooh, that's a great point. I don't know.
They never said like who busted them and who was the one who called the cops on her. I would have loved that little extra level of detail, but that's just me. I wanted a timeline of events on this lady. But Georgie made me sad, but at the same time, my thoughts about him was again, why haven't you left? Get out of here. Get out of this town.
So true. So true. He drops a bombshell to Elizabeth, stating that his mom was abused as a child by her brothers. That was surprising, but not surprising at the same time in this moment in time when we hear this information, because unfortunately, abuse people, or they may
Mhm.
not have it can stunt your growth in a way that it rewires your brain in a way that you think certain scenarios are okay when they're not. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And I feel like that was a major nugget that Elizabeth got in her shadowing at this point in the film.
Well, I think because it turned a villain into another victim, right? It's that whole mindset of the psychological breakthrough about motivation, right? Because
Yes.
before you did
Yes.
not have an understanding of what could have possibly been her motivation behind her behavior. So
Right.
once Elizabeth gets this nugget, it's like, oh, pieces make sense now psychologically. I have this layer of trauma myself. So, of course, I'm going to go about, if I've never healed from that, causing harm to other people. To your point, we've seen that even with pop culture examples of R.
R.
Kelly supposedly
Kelly.
getting
Yep.
molested by his sister and possibly others as a child. They talk about Michael Jackson most likely probably got abused and molested at some point. So definitely seemed, even me as an audience member, I was like, oh, makes
Mm-hmm.
sense type of moment. Not that it justifies anything. Let me be clear.
Right.
Does not justify, but makes so much sense. And then to Elizabeth's point, why, if she was abused by her brothers, would she still be talking about them so much and be so close to them?
Exactly. But up until this point, Georgie was dropping bars. Like he had me cackling when he introduces himself and says, "Tell me how selfish I am, and I'll tell you if it match." Comparing him and his mother's characteristics. And then ultimately he said, there's no situations without casualties. And I believe he was referring to himself. I thought it was interesting that he immediately started hustling with Elizabeth, talking about, let me be the music supervisor for this film and I'll tell you more.
I wish
I
I had that
wouldn't
level of confidence.
listen. He's still a man. Um,
Shooting shots left and right.
ain't got no experience.
She saw him perform in a band in a restaurant, and he thinks he can be a music supervisor on a film that may be going to cinemas around the world.
He walked off the stage mid song. You know who would never do that? Beyonce. She would never.
He threw water in the face of his drummer. He ran back up on stage talking about such and such. You can't sing this. I mean, he was a bully. He was
That was also a
antagonizing the
funny
whole
part.
band.
Bandmate looked up at him like, "What? Okay,
He
yeah, no."
did. He looked like a deer caught in the headlight.
So Georgie was an interesting character to say the least in Elizabeth's interactions with him. Let's get into the nitty gritty, okay? Let's talk about Gracie. Gracie character was something. She was borderline textbook a narcissist for me.
Borderline. I think she is absolutely a textbook narcissist.
Everything from literally, I felt like her entire household were stepping on eggshells when interacting with her because the way she felt about something was paramount above all. And there's so many situations throughout the film where we see this, from the daughter getting a dress. She was adorable in that sleeveless gown. Adorable. And that passive aggressive way that Gracie essentially told her, your arms are fat, you need to pick out another dress, was something that's next level white woman for me.
You know what that scene did for me is it made me realize that she's toxic on a level beyond the scandal of what she has done, because her kids are already the product of such insane circumstances that they had absolutely nothing to do with. And then you also body shame your daughter on top of that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was like, I thought maybe if nothing else, you seem like you may be lovely and loving towards this family that you've created, but nope.
Right, because it's the us against the world concept, right? But no, no one's happy in this household.
And even Natalie Portman, you see her clock it, right? You see them having like a little banter for a minute and she clocks that. She's like, oh, damn, you are fucked up. Like, you just
Literally.
bullied your child about her high school graduation dress and her body. And those seeds live in people's heads forever.
That is so true. And that's how I knew this wasn't of God. Okay? This love that she claims that she had for this boy.
Oh, I didn't need this. It wasn't
Girl.
of God when that child was still a child. When you're looking
Girl, I know.
at a 12-year, you know when it became the most glaring too? Again, sometimes you can forget when you get older about what a child looks like at certain ages unless you're around those children. So when the scene comes where Natalie Portman is looking at the videos of the kid trying to be Joe, and you're like, that's what a 12 or 13-year-old boy looks like. It was so viscerally disturbing to me to think about.
Necessary.
We are the age that she would have been when she started abusing him. So like that mind, like it's unfathomable. And even Billy in that video, again, going back to the video, guys, look it up. American Eternal. He said, I'm 35. Could I imagine messing with a 12-year-old girl? No.
No.
I could not.
We're jumping the gun a little bit because I wanted to spend time on Gracie, Elizabeth, and Joe.
I'm sorry.
But when it comes to Elizabeth, when she told the director they're not sexy enough, the director was like, you need to come home now. Did you peep that?
And I couldn't tell if it was because of that or because of other circumstances that we'll have to get into about Elizabeth's character as a whole. Because Elizabeth is not a good character to me whatsoever either. Elizabeth is shady as hell. Elizabeth is shady as hell.
I mean, honestly, are they two sides of a coin? Shameless.
Natalie Portman said in an interview that they both were so attracted to each other because they're both so self-centered that being around each other was like looking in a mirror.
Ooh, and Gracie didn't like it though.
I thought that was very telling about the experience that we have towards them, because it's not just this mimicking of, oh, I'm trying to get into character. It's also a regard for, I see something in you that I see in myself, whether I like it or not.
And Gracie didn't like it because people like her don't like accountability, period.
And I also think they didn't specify it in the film, but you also don't necessarily want a younger version of you around, you know? She's getting to be a woman of a certain age. She has a husband who is in his mid-30s that could possibly still have prime. Exactly. So it was not specifically stated, but that has to be a factor in her mind. Has to be.
That's so true. That's so true. Girl, speaking of both of them, that makeup scene in the bathroom, what were we doing? What were we doing?
An actor would have to tell you because this whole deep dive into trying to embody her so much that you want her product she wears and all that. I mean, I guess that's similar to J Lo going and sleeping in Selena's bed when she was trying to get into character, but obviously totally different circumstances because um there was an intimacy to me that you're trying to embody when you're playing the character of Selena and her family and all that versus I feel like this whole thing with Elizabeth was more about her ego than it was about actually figuring out how to play Gracie, if that makes sense. Like to me, so much of it was I'm going to waltz into this town. I'm better than all these people. I am
Interesting.
that
You think she felt that?
1,000%. I think she thought she was better than everybody else that she interacted with that was there. 1,000%. I think that she thought in her mind she was coming and was going to, take something from these people. And the funny thing to me is, I don't think she realized what an opponent Gracie was going to be in the midst of all of that. And that fucked her up a little. That's going to fuck her up a little bit. Because think about it. Anybody coming probably from like Hollywood, all of that, you already have an air to you a little bit.
Yeah.
And so to come into a situation where you probably already don't agree with, because I wouldn't go in there agreeing with anything. You're gonna have even an extra level of like, I'm better than you. You ain't shit. So here we go.
And again, speaking to Gracie's narcissistic tendencies, her crying over a cancel order. I'm like, girl, have you not been resourceful?
Her multiple emotional breakdowns.
Was a tool of manipulation, wasn't it?
It was so weird both times because I'm like, is this supposed to be reminiscent to the fact that you're still childlike in certain ways, that he has to constantly
Mm-hmm.
emotionally console you? Is this always been the dynamic of your relationship that you try to say that's why he had the emotional maturity at this young age and you were, you know, seduced by him type vibe? I mean, it made her seem unstable.
Very, very unstable.
And yeah, there could be for sure in a level of emotional manipulation to keep him around because I think he thought she couldn't survive without him.
Let's go ahead and talk about Joe. Joe, I have two things to say about him. One, he had dead eyes. Like he was walking around like a zombie through his own life. And then two, it felt like a cult, Ashley. The
Mm.
mindset of a cult. Him and those children, and Gracie was their leader.
I had so many feelings about Joe. First of all, good job on desexifying Charles Melton because that's a fine ass man.
He gained
Okay.
40 pounds for the role.
This meager, meek vibe that he gave
Yes.
off. I mean, he felt like a victim in his life and in his circumstances. He felt like a prisoner of his circumstances, and that came out of his pores in this role.
It
Um,
did. That's so well said.
he seemed so confused often about his role, even within his own family. Like it seemed like sometimes Gracie was parenting him. Like the scene where I think he had come in the house and he got a beer, she was like, that's two,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And even his relationships and dynamics with his children, like the roof scene where he's talking to his son. You're like, do you see him as your father or as like your friend?
Well, for me, again, Charles did a phenomenal job and he's already winning this award season. I think what he does so well is you can feel the remorse, the sadness of a lost childhood. Like that graduation scene with him tearing up, what I felt was he didn't have the opportunity to have such a grand event happen and with no strings attached, no responsibility, and having the sky be his limit. You know what I mean? But then it was also the pride of like, this is the state of my life. I am a 36-year-old empty nester.
Crazy. It's crazy. I don't know how they've managed to go along for so long without him being introspective. It could be a result of age. Because think about how much more introspective we've gotten over time. Like there were definitely things I didn't examine in my 20s, right? I wasn't thinking about
No,
certain things.
but when you have children, just call those the dark ages sometimes, especially when they're young.
Yeah, your life, they're like
It's not
they
yours.
suck up, yeah,
Yes.
all the energy and mental things you could be putting into yourself is going into the betterment of your children.
When I tell you that was part of the reason why I didn't want to have kids until I was 30 was because I'm like, as soon as I have a kid, it's gonna be from like, for example, if I had kids at like 25, I'm like, I know I won't remember anything until I'm 30. Like I had
Yeah.
that mindset and I was like, you know what? Not to say the 30s are different in terms of like, I don't know, but what I'm trying to say is,
Well, you've gotten a chance to fortify yourself, right?
yes,
Solidify yourself a
exactly.
little bit more in the
Before
ways, yeah.
you give yourself.
It was also a thing with him with like his verbal communication. I don't know how much people
He was
clock
scared
that.
to talk. Girl, when he was trying to actually have the talk, because that's one of my questions to you. Like, can you believe that he's never talked about the situation of getting caught and being in a relationship with this quote unquote relationship with this woman as a 13-year-old boy with his own father and even with her?
Yeah, he needed therapy that he never got because he never was able to get away from what was hurting him, which was her. This child was sexually abused. He was made to believe that he was the dominant one and
The
that
boss,
this
quote
was his
unquote.
choice. And so he's
Yep.
like, "Well, I'm just going to go with it." And I think again, I've spoken about this on the podcast we did for the Jennifer Lawrence film No Hard Feelings, and to some extent I feel this way about this. There's a perception sometimes about boys and in terms of what their sexual appetite may be even at younger ages and all this stuff that I don't know if it's always healthy for them. Like at 12, 13, he may have been already interested, but it didn't mean he was prepared for any of the consequences of
Emotionally
sexual
ready
activity, especially with a grown ass woman, right? So I
with
just think
children.
if he were a girl and this were a male teacher, obviously this situation would have been so different. He would have been treated so differently. And it just, like I said, Joe, the portrayal of Joe absolutely crushed me. Like it was so devastating to watch this broken person trying to navigate through, especially when you have these children. Because to his point, if I say that this was a mistake, if I say I wasn't ready, what does that mean for my relationships with my children?
I'm going to take a quick pivot. And in researching for this recap, I came across this video on YouTube that talks about this trope in movies and TV shows with the older teacher and young student dynamic. Unfortunately, it's prevalent and it's still going on, Ashley. It is worth knowing. I never watched Dawson Creek, but
Oh,
Casey
I told you about Pacey's affair with his teacher. I told you about that.
was, I don't
We
remember.
talked
I
because I
don't
was talking
remember.
about Dawson's Creek on a particular recap that we were doing or something, went down a rabbit hole. And I told you the fact that Pacey had had an affair with his teacher when he was still in high school. Yes,
Wow. 15 years old. And
they
she was 36 years old in the show. And this is a right around the same time of the real life
Mary Kay
incident.
Letourneau. They even had
Yes.
a more current example on Blackish. Amanda Seals, when she was Junior's teacher in an episode, the grandma was warning him, like, boy, don't play. I think that teacher likes you. XYZ. He was like, oh no, she ain't paying no attention to me.
No,
And
I
then
didn't see that
you come to the
episode.
moment where it's like, no, she does. She is trying Junior. Yes. Yes.
Riverdale, Archie falling for a music teacher. And I bring these examples up because even though this conversation is really uncomfortable, this is the first time in the canon where they show the emotional damage of the young man.
Except for the only other example I could say that I feel like, not to interrupt you, 50 Shades of Grey. I know that he did not
Ooh,
think that he had been
yes.
damaged by that affair with his
Yes.
mother's, but you saw the prolonged damage in his relationships and in his sexual dominance, the way
Yes,
he
because he
wanted
was
to
a
dominate
sadist.
women. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
That's the only other example I could give.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It was just portrayed differently because he was very successful. He was
Right.
very in control of himself in a different way than Joe. But again, there was damage.
But victims of sexual assault, there is this notion that they're either extremely controlled or they're like quote unquote overweight or like emotionally docile. So in some ways, I can see it. You understand what I'm trying to say? Like
Mm-hmm.
even his stuttering to Gracie when he was finally trying to have the conversation of like, didn't you think I wasn't ready to make these type of decisions? And she was like, who was the boss? Who was the boss? I'm like, are you coaching him? He can't make his own mind up. When she told Elizabeth that he had more sexual partners than she did, I was like, what the fuck?
Only difference, ma'am, is he had been with two other girls before you. You had been married and popped out children. Okay. It was deeply, like I said, deeply, deeply disturbing. She clearly needed help as he did, but unfortunately, I don't think she was ever going to change or be willing to look at her actions. And they never said in the movie, did she serve any real jail time the way that Mary Kay Letourneau did? Like, I know she gave birth
Yes.
in prison, but how long did they say?
I don't remember how long, but in real life, she served originally 6 months and they let her out saying, oh, if you never contact this boy again, you'll be fine. Guess what? That didn't happen because she got pregnant again and she served the full sentence of 7 years and was
Yep.
on the pedophile list, frankly. I don't know what they call it. Let's talk about Elizabeth again. This method acting situation was fascinating. I'm thinking about how she wanted to go into the pet store in the storage room and act out a scene of passion by herself. I'm like, sis, really?
Again, I think it was all stroking her ego. I think she was having a good old time. It was always this little smirk, always this little wink wink at like, look how I'm infiltrating these people's lives and exploiting them for the sake of this performance. I just really,
You felt that.
as much as I did not like Gracie because of her moral failures, as a person, I despise Elizabeth.
I do have a question to ask you. If you were an actress, how would you choose your roles? Would Gracie be a person you would want to play?
That's a great question. I do agree with the whole idea of, as an actor, it always seems exciting to go into roles that stretch you, and there's a moral gray, and you have to try to figure them out and get into the psychological side of what made them how they are and all of that. Again, as much as I feel strongly about sexual predators, I don't know if I would necessarily want to portray a character like Gracie, but as an actor or actress, I mean, I think you go with your gut at different periods of time in terms of what you feel like is going to help you stretch in your craft. So I'm sure as an actor or actress, I would look at it way differently because I'm trying to bring something to life in a certain way professionally that I don't have the perspective on right now. Because for me, it's like, why is this movie even being made? One could even say, why was May December made? Because in terms of content or storyline, I would
Yeah.
love to hear why they felt like this was the story that they wanted to tell.
Again, I see the value because going in, I was like, why? Why? But if you take a closer look at the media that's out there, our culture celebrates young men trying to get with their older teachers. And we need to show that you will emotionally regret all of this if you grow old with this woman. Because again, the power dynamics are off. And I feel like as a culture, we now have language to it that we didn't have in the 90s, especially in light of like the Me Too movement, men being vocal about the abuse they've experienced through the years. And so,
Well, I hope this resonates with, to your point, men. And because I don't know, I think the way that even the marketing has been done, I originally didn't even know what the movie was about. And I don't know if it grabs a male audience in the same way, but I hope it does. I hope it resonates. And not just with men, because obviously we're all needing to take accountability in society, but just I hope it resonates with them as well in terms of some level of understanding.
Elizabeth sneaks around with Joe, first at his job, and then they sleep together after a family dinner. My question to you, Ashley, Joe immediately went into cuddle mode. And when she they started talking and she referred to his life as stories, that pissed him off, which is rightfully so, because it's like, do you realize I'm still a person? I'm not an object. He was like, why did you sleep with me then? And she said, because that's what adults do. Did you feel like that was a taunt?
Trying to say you're not an adult type of
That
thing.
or that or I'm thinking when she was like, oh my, you and me are the same age. You're an empty nester. I don't even have any kids. Or I've lived a life that you have not because you've been cooped up with that chick over there type of deal. Adults bang.
I just think Elizabeth is a user. And her excuse about that's just what adults do probably also justifies her affair with her director. Probably the way she treats her fiance when she hurried him off the phone and lied about getting another call.
Woo.
Like I said, as much as I don't like, I think Gracie is a terrible person and character. I despise Elizabeth as well because from the portrayal that I've seen in the film, she does not seem like she's a nice or genuine person whatsoever. Even the way she spoke to the high school class when she went and talked at the whatever drama class or whatever it was that they were doing and the talking about the sex scenes and stuff, I was just like, you get a kick out of your own behavior. And I don't know how much you got to deal with the consequences of that, but I'm sure it's going to come at some point because you can't just treat people like this. And you're coming in supposedly doing research and you fuck the husband of the subject that you're going to be portraying with no thinking
Crazy.
that there will be no care or consequences for it. I mean, she's a different type of person. I'll say that.
Crazy.
If she ever saw Joe as a victim, it didn't seem like she really cared that much about what also her action, how her actions were also going to impact him.
And for the sake of the recap, after Joe sleeps with Elizabeth, that's when he started finally wanting to have the conversation with Gracie. Should Elizabeth have been invited to family life events?
No, I wouldn't have invited her personally, but we see a different perspective as the audience than they get to see. And so, for me, like I said, I've gotten the sense that Elizabeth is a user, so I want her around as sparingly as possible. But would I have ever let her come to my house? Period, is the question. And I don't know if I'm that person that would have ever let her in my home. So,
What did you think about Gracie's family dynamics? The two families coming together for the celebration.
well, I thought it was interesting to think that she's been able to maintain any level of relationship with her older children because from the Mary
Right.
Kay Letourneau case, I believe that she
That
had a very strained relationship with those kids. And that would be
exactly.
my expectation about this too. The only thing I will say that I think is probably more of a credit of who Julianne Moore actually is that she seemed much more self-possessed in a certain way than Mary Kay Letourneau from the bit that I saw of her. Mary Kay Letourneau seems so
Ooh,
much more um insane in a certain way that I can't,
unhinged.
yeah, like
Yeah,
can't
I
can't put
saw
my
that too.
exact finger, but you know what I'm saying? Whereas Julianne
Yep.
Moore felt like she was very in her body and even though she may have done these wrong things, she, as a parent and as an adult, can navigate. You know what I mean? Navigates the waters.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why her children have continued to have a relationship with her, because she's continued to be a mother in a certain way that they would have needed a mother. But it's still, as an adult, a decision to be like, hey, I'm going to continue to fuck with you or I'm not. So that was
So true.
surprising.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I saw that whole interview as well with the real life people, and the lawyer kept saying it, and you saw it in Mary Kay's interaction, that she saw no wrong in what she did at all.
To the
None.
day of the interview, still did
To
not.
that day, saw nothing wrong. The fact that she called herself girlfriend and boyfriend with a 13-year-old boy, and what they did was out of love. Again, skin crawling,
And he kept giving
Ashley.
her these hard side eyes. Like, did I? Like,
And
he probably doesn't even remember half of the stuff you're talking about because he was a child.
in addition to that, what's so eye opening is they were divorced literally a year later.
Mm-hmm. Because he had already separated from her. He was just kind of trying to figure things out. I think, again, as their children, they were at the same point that they are in the
Yes.
movie of this
Yes.
whole empty nester stage. So, and then I enjoyed once I saw that, not enjoyed, but I noted once I saw that, again, with him giving her side eyes all the time, the point in the film where Natalie Portman is starting to ask questions about, well, how did you guys meet? When do you first remember seeing Joe? And this is that. Charles Melton had an eye tick. I don't know how many people noticed that. He ticked his eye every time she said certain things. And it was like a casual reference, I think, to, again, the trauma of thinking
Mm-hmm.
back to that time. And so, again, the similarities to me, once I saw that interview between, like, that pool of, you can tell he's uncomfortable. You can tell this is not something that he agrees with, but he's here and he's standing by her, but he's not happy about the circumstances. I thought that was really well done.
But you notice when telling their story, oh, was it sixth grade? No, it was seventh. Like, that's any better.
Right. He was in middle school, not elementary. Gross.
The film ends two scenes, graduation scene. Again, Elizabeth having no shame, walking up to Gracie at the end saying, I'm on my way out. And Gracie hits Elizabeth with what Georgie said to you about my brothers were not true. She said, insecure people are dangerous. That shook Elizabeth to her core, Ashley. She was shooketh.
Good.
Did Gracie win this match?
Yeah. Yeah, I think she did because, again, that's why I said I think that there was so much of Elizabeth's, like, ego and I'm better than mentality that she went in with, that she would have never thought they would have been able to outsmart her, right? Like, oh, Georgie talked to you about that? Like, yes, I speak to my son every day. He told me what he said to you. I just don't think she would have figured that they could outmaneuver her in terms of
Yeah.
what it was that she was doing. And so, yeah, I do think that was a little satisfying to me, just because, again, at this point, I'm like, well, you ain't shit anyway. So, as,
Yeah.
again, I don't like either of y'all, but I'm not rooting for either of y'all. That's the thing.
None.
I'm not
Yeah.
rooting for either of y'all.
No,
So
it
if
reminds me of the
Gracie,
coworker. We just finished the book.
yes, this book, guys, we read these really morally gray, bad in different ways, but still both very bad characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't root for either of you, but I do get a level of satisfaction when somebody gets egg on their face, for sure. Because it's like, then you really came here, you spent this time, you did all this stuff, you slept with this woman's husband, got 5 pumps, hope that was worth it. So
First
for
of
what?
all, first of all, I
For
was
what?
I picked up on that as well. But you know what? That's none of my business. Um Elizabeth was so shook that on the set, she was still trying to find her Gracie, needing multiple takes. Gross. Again, her petting that snake, I was like, make it stop. I also felt like her character reminded me a lot of Black Swan. Did you peep that?
No, I didn't get Black Swan, but I did pick up a little bit on her from the one movie Closer, with her, Jude Law, Julia Roberts, and Clive Owen back in the day. And this
Mm,
transition that she makes as a character
Yeah.
Later in the movie. There's a little bit of that to me in there in her performance. But
Hmm.
I mean, Natalie Portman has been in many a great role in her career.
Exactly.
I think the
Exactly.
biggest thing to me about this last scene, and I think they said it in one of the interviews, is you're thinking for her to go to all this trouble, she must be making some type of possible Oscar worthy movie. It looks like that's just about to be on Lifetime. You know what I'm saying? Like it looked like a B list.
Is that the cheap wig talking?
The cheap wig, the script, the lines, the
Yeah.
setting, it did not look any better than the made for TV film that she was watching in her hotel room. That's the thing. And so it was
Ooh.
like, again, you went to all this effort and you came into town like you're some big star because you're on some popular show. And it's like the movie's about to be trash.
Pick up on that. I'm glad you picked that you mentioned that. And for her to still not get into it. And again, if I were an actor, I wouldn't even want to be anywhere near that mind space personally,
Mm,
because we've heard actors through the years talk about how it's hard to shake off certain characters.
yep.
Dimson talking about he prayed to the dark one for inspiration, and his own mama had to get the Holy Ghost and the blood of Jesus to get him to have some peace because he was having nightmares every night.
Yeah, that's what we don't do.
That's
That's
not,
what we
we
would
don't
never
do those
do.
things. We
No.
do not play with the spiritual realm, okay?
Nope.
Famously, Lawrence Fishburne playing Ike. I think he said it might have cost him a relationship because it took him a while to shake off Ike. And then even Michael B. Jordan said Killmonger took a while for him to shake off, which I thought was interesting.
That was a sexy character, though. If you're gonna have one Michael, that was a sexy one. Okay.
To me, he was not nearly as dark as the previous characters I just mentioned. So, I mean, I don't know.
No,
Even our girl
because
Kiki Palmer said that she had, took some time to shake off characters. So,
I think because Killmonger was one of the Marvel quote unquote villains who had a purpose that people had a understanding. I see where you're coming from mindset behind,
got it.
right? It was
Yeah,
not these out of the box, oh, I'm an alien coming from outer space coming to destroy the world type villains. So, yeah. He was sexy as hell too.
he's
Anyway.
so funny. I'm glad you enjoyed him. What are your final thoughts on May, December?
Ah, this was an interesting recap. I don't think we've ever delved into subject matter like this yet on the podcast, so it was interesting to get a chance to talk about it. Sorry for all
Yeah,
the armchair psychology guys, but this is what I do in my spare time.
exactly. And again, this is a heavy topic, and that's why I tried to give the trigger warning at the very beginning, because, we said certain words that may be stressful to people. That's not our desire. So thank you for the people who have stayed with us this far in the conversation. But keep going, Ashley. I'm sorry.
For sure. Oh no, you're fine. I was just gonna say, subject matter aside, I mean, when I watched it for the first time, I was very curious to see what was gonna happen because I didn't know what they were gonna do with this. Like I said, I kind of went in blind because with the posters and all of that, I was like, what is this movie actually about? And so
Right.
it just dropped on Netflix. I was like, oh, I'll give it a shot. Natalie Portman, Julianne Moore, say less, you know?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so it was very complicated. I had a lot of feelings about it as I was watching it, like I said. It's rare that I don't like Natalie Portman. Still love her as an actress, but rare I don't like her as a person. So that was
Mm,
interesting for me. Julianne Moore needs to teach some classes because she is phenomenal. And Charles Melton, I hope he wins because he would make history if he wins the major awards this year. So
how so? Of
because
his
he
nationality?
yeah, because he will be coming up after the wins last year for Key
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
would mark like a second Asian American man winning in these categories. Never happened
Yeah.
before in history.
Right.
So that would be phenomenal. And also, I just like Charles. Like, I used to watch him on Riverdale, and it's crazy to
Yes.
see the trajectory from a show like Riverdale to then be an Oscar bait. Like, you just never know where your career can
You
go.
never know. The sun is also a star. You remember
Yes,
that
which I
one?
watched and I read that book because I'm a big
Yep.
fan of Nicola Yoon, who wrote that, as well as
You know,
Everything,
she
Everything.
has an imprint, and she has an imprint for YA books. I read one of them. It's called Queen Bee. And
Mm,
they have like 3 books on their roster now. And her and her husband, because she married an Asian bae.
Yes, she did. She has
So, fun
another
fact.
book with a black woman and an Asian man as well that I have in my book collection. But I just think that this is complicated film. Again, to your point, has some relevancy and hopefully people will get stuff from it. But if nothing else, it may win some awards. What are your final thoughts?
I went into this film code as well. And so to find the subject matter, knowing about this 90 tabloid story in real life, I'm like, why are we telling this story? And like, is it one for one adaptation or what? And so it was such an interesting concept because I'm like, yeah, it's loosely based off real events, but it's about an actress shadowing this family. I'm like, okay, this is, again, I appreciate the originality of it. This topic definitely was an uncomfortable one. I think, yeah, we've never covered a subject matter like this before, and we're not in any type of hurry to do it again anytime soon. But definitely a lot of Oscar bait going on with everyone's performance, the top three leads, and so it should be interesting what that's going to look like. I think it was interesting because someone made this argument and I could see it. They feel like these are individuals who were associated with the film, the evolution of tabloid culture evolving into the true crime obsession that we live in today through podcast and TV shows and things like that. And I was like, it's always fascinating to see how some things are the same, but they change, right, in certain ways. And honestly, a lot of those 90s tabloid have been translated into these podcasts because the stories are always so fascinating, especially the cold cases like the John Benet Ramseys
Mm-hmm.
and everything like that. So
Yeah, I'm good for a true crime series. Watch a lot of
yeah.
them. I
Do
was even
you?
watching the latest one about the doctor who was, I started it, but sometimes you got to be in the mood too. I started it about the doctor who was renowned for his innovations and all these things, but he ended up killing a whole bunch of his patients through
What?
like it was like artificial something with your throat. I cannot remember what the piece is called. But he yeah, it was a whole crazy situation that went down with him and the like people who had employed him and all of that. And yeah, it's hard to watch some of the medical ones too because of the casualties involved in a lot of those. But also, I had watched one not too long ago about the organization that was talking about soulmates and your twin flame. I think that was the name of it, like twin flames, and that just got
Huh?
real dark because they've
Did
started
it?
playing around with people in terms of trying to force people to have sex change operations and all this different stuff. So they just get some of them get real crazy.
It's always important to know that these things are man-made, which means there could be some significant issues with them. Just always keep that in mind.
Hmm. And try not to
Don't
be
don't
easily
give all your
influenced. Have
yes.
discernment in your life with things. Because I know a lot of times as humans, we have these soft spots. We have these places in our psyche, in our hearts, and our experiences that allow for people with nefarious intent to come into those spaces. But just guard yourself as much as possible because there are a lot of people out here trying to take advantage in various
Truly.
ways.
And they're sneaky devils because they are very, very aware of what they're doing. They're masters of it.
Hmm. Truly,
Manipulation.
truly masters.
Time for hidden gems.
All right. So I just literally added another one because I was really wanting to have some type of holiday hidden gem as well for our last recap of the year as we're in the holiday season. So my first one is a book. Killers of a Certain Age by Deanna Raybourn. I heard Jasmine Guillory talk about this book in an interview in terms of recommendations. And Jasmine Guillory is a fantastic writer and enjoy so much of her work. So I was like, oh, if she's
I love
recommending this,
her. I love her.
I have to give this a shot. And I really enjoyed it. Like I already have a cast in my mind should this movie or should this book become a movie or a TV series. But it's about ladies who are retiring from a government organization called the Museum, and they are going out on like their, trip together as their retirement, and they figure out that a hit has been put out on them by the organization. And so this whole book is about them trying to figure it out and whether they survive and track it down, all this stuff. And it was a fun journey because they dip between the present and the past, and it's four ladies, and it was just a hell of a ride. I really enjoyed it. Second hidden gem, Slow Horses, Apple TV Plus. I'm telling y'all be getting me with these shows. Slow Horses, I've already binged through three. I'm on season 3, and I'm up to date to watch the latest episodes that are dropping. This is a Gary Oldman leads this cast, and it is basically about I don't want to say rejects from the MI5 organization in England, but basically it's like if you have not been up to par with whatever it is that they're looking for from you as an agent, you get put into what they call Slough House. And so they call them the Slow Horses. And it's about these gaggle of misfits and their adventures in MI5, being that they are considered to be the low tier of the organization. It's very, very good. And then my final is Family Switch with Jennifer Garner and Ed Helms on Netflix. I really, really enjoyed this movie more than I even thought. There were some serious, like, laugh out loud moments. I love a good body switch moment, and this is the first time I've seen one with the entire family switching
Mhm.
bodies. Now, there were some weird, cringeworthy scenes that I know the internets have been talking about in this movie, and I totally agree with y'all, by the way. But this movie was still really, really funny, and it's holiday, and it was just a vibe, and Jennifer Garner hasn't really stepped her foot into this since 13 going on 30, which they do make reference to. So it was just fun and delightful in certain ways. So if you get into like that whole body switch type of film, or you just want another holiday movie to put on your rotation, give this one a shot. So those are my 3 hidden gems for the final episode of the year. Delora, what about you?
I have 2, Ashley. All right. The first one is in that true crime realm. It's available on Peacock. It is called Found. It is a drama, and there are about 11 episodes. It's starring Shanola Hampton and our boo, Mark Paul Gosselaar.
Shanola, I think this is her first thing I've seen her in since Shameless. So I do want to give this series a try. I just haven't started it yet.
It's giving Scandal. It's very procedural in terms of there's a missing person and her team finds it, but where it gives me the Scandal vibes is because, she's like a PR consultant and she has a gaggle of misfits. So you have the tech guy and the muscle guy, and you know what I mean? But there's a twist. And it's not a spoiler, but it was something that I didn't fully understand until I watched it. But she herself was a missing person, and so that's what drives her in every episode. And so that's all I'll say about that series. So Found. My second hidden gem is a book, and it's Christmas related. It is very popular on Book Talk, and Instabook. It's called Lovelight Farms by B.K. Bronson. I believe this is her debut novel. I read it last year. I adore it. I'm rereading it this year because it is a fake dating, friends to lovers, Christmas themed rom-com, and I'm in heaven. So, and it's surprisingly steamy, which I appreciate as well. So very sweet. It's like when the guy is sweet and nerdy, but like filthy and sexy behind Ashley's face.
These tropes are
I
hilarious.
love it. I love it. Give
Clark
me an
Kent.
HEA.
Clark
All
Kent
right.
out here.
That's all I
That's
got.
that's great. Guys, oh my gosh. Can you believe it?
2023.
It's a wrap on us for 2023. It has been such a pleasure chatting with you guys this year, talking about some fun stuff this year. We will be back past the holidays. So you guys have a very Merry Christmas, a very Happy New Year.
If y'all want to give us a gift, rate our podcast on Apple TV. Give us some stars on Spotify. We would greatly, greatly appreciate it.
And share this episode, please, because we want to continue to grow and reach more listeners and have more interaction with everybody out there. So we so appreciate it. We will be back in the new year. In the meantime, as always, be blessed.